That's right, I've just started my YouTube career and I've already lost my creative integrity. Minecraft, a game with slightly more money and slightly fewer children than the Catholic Church. But despite being the biggest game in the world, there are some problems. Wow, shocking, a 20-something-year-old playing a children's game has problems. The game has many systems in it. Unfortunately, a lot of them are basically useless. Like me. Many of them seem confused, like they don't serve an actual purpose beyond just bloating the game. And I'm not just talking about the recent editions being shit. Everyone and their dog has already beaten that to death. The sniffer is a bit underwhelming and the archaeology system is a bit disappointing. Wow, what a brave fucking statement. Be careful, you might end up on an FBI watch list with those radical ideas. No, I'm talking about the systems that Mojang has left to rot, like a dog in a hot car. Systems that have been in the game for years but have never been useful in a survival playthrough. And I'm looking at this from the perspective of a normal survival world. Just me and maybe some of my very real friends that I definitely have.
Playing Minecraft. Oh!
And also I play on Java because... But most of what I'm going to say also applies to Bedrock. Side note, for all their talk of parity and consistency between the versions, some things are just completely different between them. Like the way damage is calculated. Like, why are these numbers different?
The numbers, basically.
And also, just to clarify up front, nothing I suggest is ever going to be done. Something a lot of people seem to forget when they're talking about ways to improve Minecraft is that Minecraft is already the most popular game in the world. Microsoft has no need or interest to change game mechanics. Their #1 priority is don't rock the boat. It's the reason why we get all these bullshit filler updates that don't actually add anything. But just because something is successful doesn't mean it can't or shouldn't be improved.
Literally nobody wants that.
Chad, this is a valuable resource.
Yeah, that is not valuable.
Look at that!
It looks retarded.
First up on the chopping block is brewing. A system with so much potential that falls so flat. There are 19 types of potions in Minecraft, and only like 3 of them have common use cases. Water breathing is good when exploring ocean monuments. Fire resistance is really helpful in the Nether, especially when fighting blazes. And night vision is good if you don't know how to install Fulbright. There is also the weakness potion to cure zombie villagers, but you're not really using the potion for its actual effect. It's more like an ingredient to make something. Outside of these though, it's only niche uses. When am I ever going to be in a situation where I'm like, you know what I really need right now? To be able to jump 1 block higher for exactly 1 minute and 30 seconds. And this is possibly potions' biggest fault. They don't last nearly long enough. A potion like Jump Boost could be really useful, like when navigating steep terrain. But because they're so short, you need to drink every time you encounter the slightest obstacle. I mean, Jump Boost 2 only lasts 1.5 minutes, and making it requires a rabbit's foot. That's a 19% drop at looting 3. That's 1 rabbit every 51.3 seconds. Regeneration 2 requires a gas tier and lasts a whopping 22 seconds for an effect on par with eating. And you know, bitches call me the Turtle Master because I only last 20 seconds. Like, Turtle Master is a fun idea, but getting skewed is such an asinine and time-consuming process. Just to get something so short is pretty disappointing. Actually, I might be starting to see where these girls are coming from. To be fair, most potions aren't that hard to obtain, but there is an issue that they all share, and that's that they can't stack. Inventory space is already so limited, which is another issue that Mojang doesn't seem interested in actually fixing. A potion like Swiftness could be really useful when exploring. Maybe provide that elytra alternative all the hall monitors are looking for. But to get any meaningful use out of the effect, you need to fill up half your inventory with speed. Extending the duration of the effects and making them stackable would open up so many new possibilities. Like, do you know how nice it would be to have Jump Boost when trying to build? I really don't see longer durations or stacking as game-breaking changes. Mostly they would just be really nice quality of life changes so I don't have to keep stopping what I'm doing, placing a shulker, and playing Inventory Management Simulator every few minutes to top up an effect. Well, technically there is one way to get any potion effect to stack. Tipped arrows are potion's stupid little brother. First off, they're oddly hard to get. If you want any large quantity of them, which, considering their ammo, you're probably going to want a few of them, you need to beat the game. And if you run out, you're going to need to resummon the dragon. And the effects are just useless. And I know a lot of them are meant to just be funny, like shooting somebody to make them breathe underwater, or shooting somebody to make them invisible. But even the effects that should be useful just aren't. Considering a bow is a weapon, you probably want to do more damage. Like with Arrows of Harming, a name that gives the same vibe as
Road work ahead? Yeah, I sure hope it does.
arrows that do extra damage. Sounds great. Except for the part where the harming effect actually heals half the mobs in the game. So you actually need to carry around 2 sets of arrows for when you encounter undead mobs. And the same problem applies to regeneration and poison. You need a hot swap depending on what you're fighting. A transition about as smooth as my Ford Focus going from first to second.
Oh, what on earth?
All for the earth-shattering, game-breaking effect of 2 seconds of poison.
Wow.
Which can make a normal mob with the average 20 HP a 1-2 shot. A massive improvement on the basic Power 5 bow, which kills in 1 to 2 shots. Shit. Yeah, there are 76 types of mobs in Minecraft, and a Power 5 bow can guarantee 2-shot, if not 1-shot, all but 10 of them. And that includes bosses. And maybe that's where they'd shine, against the Ender Dragon and Wither. Bosses have large enough health pools that you can really see the difference the extra damage makes. Except for the part where they are immune to all potion effects, so they do literally nothing.
Wow.
Tipped arrows really are one of those things that sound like a great idea, but no consideration was ever given to how they'd actually be used.
Sounds good, doesn't work.
In basically every situation, they make no difference. And trying to even use them is such a hassle. You spend so much time fucking around in your inventory trying to select the right one, you could have just shot the thing again with a normal arrow. Nothing beats the classic sword and bow combo. And I mean that. All the other weapons they've added fucking suck. Remember before they added the mace and everybody was freaking out about how game-breaking and overpowered it was? Then it got added and everybody immediately forgot about it? Because it actually sucks. For starters, they're a pain in the ass to get. A heavy core is only a 7.5% drop chance from ominous vaults, so on average you need to do over 13 to get 1 core. Then once you do eventually get it, they're a pain in the ass to use. To get the thing to work, you need to be jumping off of stuff like a member of One Direction, and the results will probably be about the same. Oh, but you can one-shot the Warden! How often are you actually falling from world height? You know there's a difference between a feature and a gimmick, right? Its gimmick is that it can do one really big hit, but this almost never happens. There aren't nearly enough high HP mobs to justify a slow one-shot, one-kill weapon. Most of the time you're just fighting normal mobs in a field or a cave, where there's not enough stuff to be jumping off it consistently to make the thing work. And where it seriously struggles because it's way too slow. And besides, a sword can already 2-shot pretty much anything anyway. Or on Bedrock, where a critical attack can already 1-shot most things. Similar problems exist for the Trident, which is like the bastard love child between the sword and the bow. At first glance, it doesn't seem too bad. It does 9 damage, which is more than a Netherite sword. Except on Bedrock, where it actually does the same damage. The problems for the Trident really begin once you start enchanting. Impaling, the enchantment that increases the damage it does, has a caveat that makes it completely useless. It only affects aquatic creatures. You know, like fish and turtles, mobs whose natural predators are plastic straws. There are only 2 hostile mobs it affects, Guardian and Big Guardian. And no, Drown don't count. Okay, so it might not do much damage, but it makes up for it in versatility because it can also act as a ranged weapon. Except it's a pretty shit ranged weapon, this ain't no Moonveil. It does about the same damage as a normal bow, but once you enchant the bow, it does around double to triple the damage. And the bow attacks way faster because you don't need to retrieve your weapon after every attack, which is definitely important with Minecraft's jank hit reg. Huh? I believe it was Sun Tzu who said, "Don't throw your weapon, dipshit." If you actually want to use it as a ranged weapon, then loyalty is a necessity, because otherwise...
And it's gone.
And even then, loyalty isn't the most reliable thing in the world.
What are you aiming at?
The real problem is if you can enchant a Trident with Impaling and Loyalty, then you can enchant a sword and a bow with Sharpness and Power, which just obsoletes the Trident. So it's pretty bad in the late game, but it could be good in the early game. Having the equivalent of a Netherite sword while you're still mining for iron will be pretty fun and provide an interesting gameplay experience. Except you're not going to get the Trident early game because it only drops from every 1 in 188 drowned, making it one of the rarest drops in the game. And even with looting 3, it's only 1 in 139. That's 4.79 Edmund Fitzgerald's worth of drowned sailors. Except on Bedrock, where it's actually a 1 in 18 chance. And even if you did somehow manage to get one in the early game, I hope you found a mending book while you were down there. Because it has the same durability as an iron sword, and there's no way to repair it. I think Yahtzee said it best back in 2011, which was over 13 years ago. Holy shit.
The ratio of difficulty to find versus actual usefulness is completely arbitrary.
It's really a shame because both the Mace and Trident can actually be pretty fun to use. Like flying using Riptide or flying using the skulls of villagers. There's nothing wrong with having gimmicks. I said the same thing about Siege. Having things that aren't that useful is okay as long as they're fun. But when the only weapons you've added to your game in 15 years are gimmicks, it kind of becomes a problem. Well, there is one other weapon they've added since the official release, and that's the crossbow. And while it's better than the others because you can get it relatively easily, at the end of the day, it's just a worse bow with some gimmick enchants. Did you know multi-shot can't hit the same mob twice? The other arrows just bounce off. I thought the point was to be a shotgun, because with the arrows flying out at 10 degrees each, you're never going to hit anything with them.
It was a miss.
10 is just unreasonable, nobody wants that. A lot of people would even say, you know, 5 is too much. I think 3 is a much more realistic number. 2.5. Speaking of overpenetration, Pierce, which is infinitely more useful than multi-shot, but seeing as we're coming from completely useless, it could really only be up. Being able to collateral enemies is way more likely to happen than having to bust out a protractor making sure that they're exactly 10 degrees apart from each other.
Miss.
But even then, you'd still be way better off just using a Power 5 bow instead of having to rely on the mobs to cooperate and stand in the right spot.
Miss input, calm down!
Pierce exists almost exclusively for the 2 birds 1 stone achievement. Oh, I'm sorry, advance. This may sound nitpicky, but I feel like the way that Mojang handles advancements says a lot about their game design philosophy. For starters, most of these aren't advancements. Advancement implies that you're progressing towards something or advancing through the game. It suggests that this is the intended way to play, but the majority of advancements are just random tasks. Get in a boat with a goat. Why? What's this advancing me towards? Same thing with look at things with a spyglass. How is this in any way progressing me through the game? Play a jukebox in the meadows. Why? What is the connection between the jukebox and the meadows? It's such a random thing to ask. What I assume happened was that somebody at Mojang was super proud that they managed to make the Planesbound for a second time. Then they realized that nobody was going to give a shit because, well, it's the Planesbound for a second time.
Wow.
This whole thing is basically just a checklist for Mojang to say, please interact with our garbage content. It's pathetic. You know, if you make good content, you don't have to tell players to use it, right? And also, if you're trying to get players to engage with your boring content, at least make the list user-friendly. Why is it a vertical list in a tiny horizontal window? You're the biggest game in the world and not a single person on staff understands basic UX design? And if you are planning on going for some of these, I hope you're keeping notes while you're playing, because the game doesn't tell you what you need to complete them. I'm supposed to visit 54 biomes and I'm missing one, but the game doesn't tell me which one it is. Well, have you been to the ocean? And was it warm? And cold? And really cold? And how deep was it at each location? And the same problem applies to other advancements like eat every type of food, tame all the cats and dogs, collect children on a private island. There's no way to track what you're missing. But don't worry, Mojang, the community will fix that for you too. From here on out, we're going to get into some more radical ideas, so if you don't want your views challenged, now's the time to go watch another fake hardcore survival video, because Netherite is really fucking stupid. The template is a good idea. Having to raid a bastion before you're able to upgrade is interesting, and I wish the game had more unique experiences like that. But after that, it all falls apart. Gathering the required ancient debris takes hours of strip mining, and it's such a fucking tedious process. Like, me and the boys are running this shit on Hamachi. Our time is pretty limited. If we wanted to spend hours in hell, we would have queued ranked siege again. But even ignoring that, it's just not worth the time and effort for such a worthless upgrade. Minecraft is not a hard game. Once you have iron armor, you're basically invincible from like 90% of the game's threats. And with enchanted diamond gear, you are invincible. The only time you die is whenever you do something really stupid. So I'm not really sure what the purpose of Invincible Plus is. And the tools aren't much better. A sword goes from a 2-shot to a 2-shot, or on Bedrock a 1-shot to a 1-shot because... And diamond and netherite mine at the same speed. So the only benefit it really has over diamond is it can't burn, which is pretty much meaningless because how often are you dying in netherite? It does have more durability, but that's negated by the fact that netherite is almost impossible to repair, because to repair netherite you need more netherite, which means a ton more mining. So much mining that you'll end up using up all the netherite's durability trying to get materials to restore the durability. So if you actually want to use netherite for anything besides, well, mining for more netherite, then mending is just a requirement, because mending makes any tool unbreakable, which negates any durability benefits netherite has over diamond. For some reason, a lot of people act like this is an issue that has to do with mending. They act like it's mending's fault that it's basically mandatory, but they never consider why it's that way in the first place. Maybe mending is so popular because some items can't function without it, and maybe because players don't want to lose items they spent hours grinding for. Maybe mending isn't the problem, maybe durability is. The durability system was designed for how the game played 15 years ago and has barely changed since. Back then, the best gear you could get was plain diamond with no enchants. Tools weren't meant to be large investments you spent hours perfecting. They were meant to be consumable resources. The purpose of having durability is supposed to limit the uses an item has, therefore causing the player to spend resources, therefore causing the player to go collect more resources. The system relies on the premise that an item that breaks can be easily replaced with the materials you've been gathering, and this still holds true in the early game, but once you progress further into the game, the system completely breaks down, because you're no longer gathering the resources required for the system to work. No one just has extra netherite lying around. You get the exact amount you need, then you never mine for it again. No one is killing 139 drown for a trident and then going, you know, I should get another, just in case. And no one has phantom membranes because any sane human being turns those fuckers off. And if you've enchanted to get the perfect gear, that can take hours of grinding. That's not exactly easily replaceable. Mending is just a necessity with how the current durability system works. They can make it slightly harder to get by geofencing it to Florida. It would also help if the repair system wasn't botched. But that still wouldn't address the core issue. They forgot what the purpose of having a durability system is. These items are way too valuable to be consumable resources. They're clearly not designed to have limited uses. I mean, netherite with Unbreaking 3 has over 8,000 uses, and once an elytra runs out of durability, it doesn't even break, it just becomes unusable. It's almost like the developers know that items this valuable breaking would be a terrible gameplay experience. And the reason players need mending on them is to effectively disable durability as a mechanic entirely. So if the developers are trying to avoid a mechanic, and the players are also trying to avoid a mechanic, then what the fuck is the point of it being in the game in the first place? These items having durability adds nothing to the game. At best, the system is pointless, and at worst, actively harmful. Removing durability would allow the usability of these items to be dictated by their capabilities and not by whether or not the player has access to mending. Plus, netherite being indestructible would actually set it apart from diamond and help justify the time investment. And in the case of the Trident, all durability really does is bar you from using it in the early game. And no, this isn't a game-breaking change. It would be a good quality of life change. Cause let's be honest here, mending isn't that hard to get. It's mostly an exercise in tedium, placing and picking up a lectern a few hundred times until you get the right book. Durability feels like something that belongs in Dark Souls, because it's in Dark Souls. And Dark Souls' durability system is actually more similar to Minecraft's than you might think, because in theory, if an item breaks in the early game, you can replace it with what you've collected. But once again, the system completely breaks down late game, because by that point, you've invested all your time and resources into upgrading one weapon. And if that weapon breaks, you don't have a replacement. Granted, I say in theory because durability almost never comes into play. You can legitimately play all the way through 1 and 3 and not even know it has a durability system. Not so much 2 though, which is probably why in the spiritual successor Elden Ring, they removed the system entirely, because they acknowledged it wasn't improving the gameplay experience. Most of the time, it's never even a factor until it very suddenly becomes a factor and derails your whole experience. And Dark Souls isn't even as punishing as Minecraft. If an item breaks, you don't lose it, you just have to pay to repair it. When you really think about it, it's pretty odd for what is ostensibly a creative sandbox to have such incredibly punishing game mechanics. Can you imagine permanently losing your items in Dark Souls? Losing multiple hours of progress because you made a stupid mistake? That would be ridiculous. Oh wait. I needed to take a step back, forget all your nostalgia, and really think about how dropping your inventory fits into Minecraft. What does it add to the game? I know, it's been in the game for 15 years and has become part of the game's identity, but similar to durability, it was designed for how the game played 15 years ago, where, again, the most valuable items were basic diamond. Back then, it made sense, and you know, it still makes sense in the early game. Because just like how every video game ever works, when a player dies, the game resets them to a slightly earlier point, which the player could usually recover from in a few minutes. Like, losing iron or diamond, that's a shame, but you can probably recover in a few minutes. But losing fully enchanted netherite with an elytra? That's not just a small inconvenience, that sets the player back by hours and completely derails their playthrough. Because now, instead of doing whatever you want to in this sandbox game, you need to spend hours reacquiring all of your gear. And it can have such a negative effect, it can just outright end playthroughs. I've personally seen people on servers lose their endgame gear and just stop playing. They're just done with the world at that point. Because grinding to get everything back is not fun, it's incredibly frustrating. And the worst part is, if you die late game, it's not going to be because of something difficult like a challenge designed by the developers. It's probably because you were goofing around or did something stupid. Last time I died late game, I was flying through a cave looking for ancient cities. I misclicked a firework and that sent me slamming into a... I died over 8,000 blocks away from home with all of my gear. And the only reason I was able to get it back was because I was able to borrow somebody else's elytra to fly back there. This was not a fun or enjoyable experience, it was genuinely stressful and frustrating, because all I could think was, I'm gonna have to waste hours of my life reacquiring everything I lost. And maybe I'm crazy, it's the reason I'm on the no-fly list, but I don't think a misclick should be punished with 10 hours of tedious grinding. And Minecraft really is an anomaly, because drop inventory on death is actually pretty rare among progression-based games. Most games with drop inventory on death usually have a pretty heavy PvP focus, like DayZ, Rust, or Battle Royales. Games where the purpose of dropping your inventory is to reward another player, and where you're not really expected to get your items back. You're usually expected to start over from scratch and basically do a whole new playthrough. And while it is common to drop some items in progression-based games, it's usually something like currency or resources. You know, items that are easily replaceable. And more importantly, not progression-critical items like weapons or equipment. And even in progression-based games where you do drop your whole inventory, usually your items aren't just scattered to the wind with a 5-minute timer until self-destruction. Usually they end up in a container where you can retrieve them at any time, therefore removing the stressful part of the recovery. It's why gravestone mods are so popular. And Minecraft could do something like this. While I don't think they go for the gravestone idea, they could do something like a treasure enchantment. Call it something like Soulbound, which makes it so if the player dies, you keep that item on respawn. So if the player dies, they still drop the resources and will want to recover, but critically, they don't drop the gear they spent hours grinding for, which they might need to recover the dropped items. And if you're worried about this being overpowered or breaking PvP, they could make it so you can only get it from trading, in the end, so you still need to beat the game first. And they could add the caveat that if another player kills you, you still drop the enchanted items. And I know, you can turn on keep inventory in the settings, and I was actually surprised to learn how many people play with that on. Because yeah, you can turn off drop inventory, or you can install a mod. And while that might make your experience better, it doesn't address the core issue. For a long time now, Minecraft has had a hard time reconciling the differences between the creative sandbox mechanics and the RPG mechanics. Because they have added many of the systems that you do find in RPGs, like potions, durability, a couple different weapons, but they're all incredibly surface level. A lot of people act like it's fine these mechanics aren't good, and additions don't need to be deep or complex, because Minecraft is a creative game, and you're supposed to find creative uses for things. And if you really don't like something, either ignore it, change settings, or mod it. But the sentiment just hand waves away any criticism, and it moves the burden of making a compelling experience from the developer to the player. And really, it just boils down to, oh, you don't like something? Fix it yourself. But this also ignores the fact that most players don't change settings or install mods. They play the game as is. And default settings by their nature are implied to be the intended way to play by the developer. And just because Minecraft is a creative game doesn't mean they should add poorly thought out content under the guise that the players will be able to figure out what to do with it. And it's not like you can actually use these in any meaningful or creative way. Most players will just get an item, goof around with it for a few minutes, realize it sucks, and then just never touch it again. And I really don't see why we can't have a creative sandbox and good RPG mechanics, especially when a lot of the fixes are so simple. Ultimately, these systems struggle for two main reasons. You have systems that have failed to evolve with how the game is played now, and you have new systems added on top of that shaky foundation. The new RPG mechanics struggle to find a place in the game because they haven't added the corresponding situations or challenges that would warrant their use. There's not really a reason to use multiple weapons, different ammo types, or buffs when a basic sword can already handle everything. And you can't have deeper complex challenges in a game where at any moment, one tiny mistake can set you back to square one. And drop inventory really is the linchpin holding everything back. Without it, it would allow for more complex and interesting challenges to be added to the endgame, which would hopefully allow for the RPG mechanics to breathe a little bit. It could also help flesh out Minecraft's progression, which is god-awful, but that's a schizo rant for another day. In the end, it would just be nice if Microsoft and Mojang cared enough to add good content themselves, instead of leeching off the community through soulless cash grabs. Now if you excuse me, I'm gonna go watch a soulless cash grab.
I'm gonna blow up